What that did was open up the pathway of understanding that our thoughts absolutely make a difference in how our body physically and mentally works.
I'll have what she's having.
Welcome to another edition of
She talks confidence.
podcast.
Welcome back. This is Tony Dufresne. This is the She Talks Confidence podcast, and I am here to welcome an amazing guest this week with so many layers to talk about confidence, about mindset, about transitioning from parenthood into career, how to do that balancing act that is so elusive to most women. It is Dr. Michelle L. Khoury. Michelle, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Oh,
Great to
I'm
be here.
so happy to have you. We had such a great talk last week about what we were going to talk about. And again, it's the problem I have with a lot of my guests is there's so much that we can chat about. I'm trying to squeeze it into a half an hour. But your specialization, the road is fascinating. You're the founder of Yogamazia and Smart Parenting with Michelle, where you support families with holistic, mindful care for pregnancy to parenting and beyond. You are a perinatal well-being coach, published author, and the founder of Smart Parenting, a maternal and children's welfare sanctuary. You started off as a pharmaceutical exec with over 20 years in global healthcare experience. And as you had indicated on your Smart Parenting with Michelle website, you talk about your pregnancies and being a mother. And you said, each of my pregnancies was a unique adventure. And the journey of raising my children taught me that achieving peace, resilience, and fulfillment while continuing to lead with purpose is not only possible, it's transformational. You discovered that developing mental fitness techniques, which we will talk about, was the key to identifying thought patterns that undermine my confidence and replace them with perspectives that serve both my professional and parenting roles. That's why you're passionate about what you do. So, again, I could continue to read your CV, but let's get into you and your journey and talking about where you started and how that got you to getting into Yogamazia and then helping families and trying to mesh that whole raising kids and having a career for women at the same time.
Yep, I certainly have been on that journey. I'm one of those high achieving women
No,
that
really? What a shocker. Really? For the record, I read about 10% of your CV, like 10%. That was it. Yeah. Yeah. That's the understatement of the whole show here, Michelle.
I was really intrigued actually by your show for that reason because I have been there. The journey has been one that has not been in a straight line, which a lot of people probably can relate to because I grew up with the typical get educated, make sure you have a reason to have an opportunity in life, and especially as a woman, of course.
Mhm.
And so immediately went into my career basically from university setting. I was a pharmacist for a few years and then had an opportunity to work with one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And so that gave me a lot of opportunity and have worked with not just that particular company, but a number of other pharmaceutical companies over a 20 plus year career experience. And that took me in many different directions from being promoted to different leadership levels to traveling the world, being a part of different regulatory approvals for different drug launches that we've had across different therapeutic areas. I was able to publish, worked with some of the top academic researchers in the world treating chronic illnesses, diseases, cancers that affect so many of us. And at the same time, I was balancing my personal life. I think society has not prepared us in a way that we will be ready to just have that sort of balancing act. So when I was pregnant with my first daughter, I was along the lines of, okay, I'm pregnant. I'm supposed to have a baby. And that was that. Anything else to really guide me through. I added like 70 pounds on. I would say that I was not one of those people who didn't care what they ate about, but I certainly didn't think about it as much as I should.
Mhm.
And when that time came and I started the labor process, I didn't even know what to look out for. And I ended up being at the hospital too early. That's what started a line of a series of events that led to things that I absolutely didn't know about, things that probably were not to my benefit. And the experience itself was mind changing. But I got through it. My postpartum was not any better. At the time, I was actually completing my master's degree. And again, nobody tells you, like, hey, you're having a baby. I don't know if this is really a good idea to like. I got
Yeah.
through it. Yes, I did. I got through it, but it was not as fulfilling, I would say.
Mm.
Yes, I finished my thesis, and at the same time, I failed at breastfeeding and I gave up after 6 weeks. And I didn't have that confidence and I didn't have that support. My mother was there with me, but my mother was raised at a point where formula was the norm for feeding.
Yeah, and she probably wasn't going through her master's thesis either. What was the dilemma in that moment? Having to prioritize both, but then not being able to prioritize both?
I was trying to finish my master's, getting that done, because in my mind, that was the path to the better opportunity.
Mhm.
If I get this done, I got to get back to work. I got to continue doing the thing and being good at that job so that I can move forward. That was the priority in my mind.
Okay.
And so, yes, I had this baby. I loved her. But did I put a lot of effort into trying to make it work in a way that would be as fulfilling? No, I didn't.
Mm. Mm, okay.
That was the unfortunate part. And then, as it happened, I ended up divorcing the father of my daughter. And I was a single mom for a number of years. And by the time I was pregnant with my second, with my now partner and husband, I had gone through a lot of changes as well. It was a 10-year span. Work wise, I was getting the promotions and doing all the other things. And on the other side of it, it was okay, do I want to have another kid? Do I want to get married again? I don't know if I wanted to have that. So it's again going back to all of these questions versus how it should be like, oh, absolutely, I can do this.
Mhm.
Let's go ahead. And so I knew when I did eventually get pregnant with my second, and while I was pregnant with her, I knew that I wanted something different. It was I think that was one of the first pivotal moments to the path that I'm on today. Granted, I probably didn't pay attention to it at that
Mhm.
point, but it was definitely a critical moment for me because my husband and daughter, we would go to the YMCA every weekend and they would do their classes. And here I am pregnant and I'm sitting there waiting for them doing nothing. And it's not to say that I was not a physical person. It just, when you're pregnant, there's a lot going on and your hormones are just shifting in a way that you're questioning a lot. And in that moment of question, I turned around and there was a yoga class going on the other side of my daughter and my husband. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. I wonder if that's something I could do because, of course, I didn't see anybody that was pregnant in that class. People are moving around, people are taking their head and putting it around their neck. And I'm just sitting there, I don't know. And my perception of yoga was very different too at the time. But at the same time, I still felt brave enough, I would say, to walk to the teacher after the class was over. And I asked her, I said, hey, can I do this class? And I would never, ever forget this. She looked at me and she smiled and she asked me, are you breathing? And I said, yes, I'm breathing. And she said, then you're already practicing yoga. And that just stopped me in my tracks because from there, it was just a matter of, oh, okay, let's see where this journey takes me.
And did you happen to start taking the class with her at that time and then
Yes.
start discovering that? People think that yoga, and we talked about this earlier, is
Mhm.
about bending yourself into a pretzel and doing downward dog and the warrior and all that
Mhm.
stuff. Being somebody that's practiced yoga over the years, I think a lot of people really don't understand what it's all about. Can you describe really what yoga is all about?
It is coming to the self. It's coming back to you. You are the center of it. And you do that by practicing all parts of yoga. There are 8 limbs. Poses, yes, and the physical aspect is one of them. Breathing, for example, is another. I won't go into the 8 limbs, but we do all of these to get to the 8th limb, which is something called Samadhi, contentment. And I feel, will we ever get to that in life? I feel like sometimes I even question that in myself. because that's what we're all yearning for, right? This
Hmm.
happiness. And that was what it taught me. And that teacher at that time, that's what she saw in me. I didn't need the physical. She saw that I needed the focus, the breathing, the mindfulness aspects, the meditation, which is another limb, that concentration, drawing inward, it's another limb. She knew to pull out the which of the 8 limbs that I needed. And at that point in time, it was not the physical part of it.
Hmm.
Now, of course, yes, that was included, and that sort of led me on to the rest of the journey. And that pregnancy and that birth ended up being so much more different than my first. In fact, I felt that it was the lesson and the experience to help me prepare for that birth, because that birth had some complications. My placenta ended up erupting, and there were a couple things that were going on there, but it helped me. It was that breathing that I had practiced through those classes and getting into more coming into myself.
In going back to that moment, which is a nodal moment in your life, it's an absolute shift in your life. It, in hindsight, that's an intuitive antenna
Hmm.
signal that consciously maybe you didn't even get right. All of a sudden, what made you turn around? What made you think that you'd like to do that? In hindsight, any thought on that? What was the thing that made you turn around?
When I think when I think back on it and the parts leading up to it, the parts after the birth, because after I had that my second daughter, we actually packed up and moved halfway across the world to Dubai. We're in a totally different country. At that point, I had just been promoted.
Mm.
I had to quit my job. I had my 9-year old at the time. I had my 3-month old with me, and I'm starting over. And at that point, the only thing that I could think of was to find a yoga class. And the journey started from there. I think it shifted me in a way that, okay, here I am. What are you going to do, Michelle? And so that was in the midst of finding the schools and finding a
Mhm.
house, finding a place to live, and doing all of these different things. While my husband, because we got there and he just went straight to his job. So it was on me to figure out how we were going to be there for the few years that we were there. And that was really where I really forced myself, I would say, to figure out where was yoga going to be fitting into my life. And I started doing a lot of trainings and it wasn't even just about the classes. And at that point, did I ever say to myself, yeah, I'm going to be teaching someone this one day? No, because even in the midst of that, I was still trying to figure out, okay, how am I getting back to my career?
To me, what that illustrates is you have completely upended things. Your foundation is no longer there. Of course, your family's there and your kids are there and your
Hmm.
identity as a mom and a
Hmm.
wife and in
But the other
yourself
half
is
of
there.
my
Right.
identity
But
was gone.
right. But now where are you? Right. And what a gift that the yoga was initially when you first found it, because you actually established that foundation for your own identity where you could, even if everything gets upended like it did, you could establish that again, because that is such an important part of you being a successful everything else,
Hmm.
being able to substantiate yourself in your own mindset, in your own grounding. Were you still in the pharmacy or the tech or the corporate at that time? And
Yes.
then how did you make the transition while still being everything else?
It was not easy, is what I would say. I had to get us settled, and I had every intention of getting back to work. It would just take a little bit more prompting as figuring it out, because of course we're in a different country, so there are different regulations, all of these aspects. I think at that time the focus was, okay, get the kids together, make sure that they're fine. I continued along this journey of yoga, and then, not shortly after, around the time when I was thinking about getting back into, okay, now I could probably find a job and everything else, I found out I was pregnant with my third.
Oh, okay. Congratulations.
So that was a very quick turnaround within
Yeah.
like a year and a half. And just when I was just kind of getting settled, we found out. And at that point, I also started to have more of a mindfulness practice. So it wasn't just the yoga. I started to look into different forms of just being able to, for lack of a better word, balance it all.
Mhm.
in this new country, no family, no friends. At that point, I was now starting to get myself into it, a year and a half in. And I ended up meeting a doula. She was a nutritionist, actually, who was also a doula and a hypnobirthing educator.
Hmm.
And coincidentally, I had just finished reading a book called Hypnobirthing. It's the Marie Mongan method. And this particular person, she was certified to educate people on this. And I thought, oh, this is cool. And I spoke to my husband. I said, hey, I'm going to have this lady. She's going to come to the house every week and we're going to do this. And he was like, what? And
Wh-
she came and explained to us exactly what it was. And we had these sessions with her every week. And what that did was open up the pathway of understanding that our thoughts absolutely make a difference in how our body physically and mentally works. So it literally expanded the whole idea of mind body connection for me and what yoga was teaching me and the eight limbs and how I incorporated all of that into what I was already practicing. And I started formulating, practicing those. It's hypnobirthing is really like a form of self hypnosis, visualizations, affirmations, a lot of mindfulness techniques that we all already probably are aware of, but it's focused more on how do you bring that into birth. And in my mind, of course, I had a somewhat traumatic first birth, complicated second birth. This time around, I was like, okay, I just started fixating on the fact that this birth is going to be perfect. Now, I say the word perfect in quotes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that was the second sort of shift that started happening because I was already more into my yoga practice, more into the philosophical aspects of it. I started traveling and trying to understand it a little bit more because this is all in the wake of me taking like a pause from my career at the time and practicing all of these visualization techniques. A lot of the things that happens with births as women, when you find out that you're pregnant, and I ask this question all the time with parents that I work with, what's the one word that you start to think of when it comes to birth? And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm just so afraid of the pain. I was there. But what is pain? Think about it. How did we know what pain was and what it felt like? As a child, sometimes babies fall and they get back up and they're laughing again. They don't even realize that they're in pain because of, again, this is going back to our subconscious and our conscious thoughts and how our thoughts and our limiting beliefs play such a big role in our lives. Now, little did I know at the time that if I used that in the context of my career, oh my gosh, would have been blown and I would have been a better leader because I had a wonderful career, a successful career. But it was that shift. I literally said to myself, this birth is going to be fine. I'm not going to have any pain. This baby's going to be healthy. I'm going to have all the time that I need with her after she comes from the womb. And, even though we planned a hospital birth and my husband and the doctor and everybody's like, yeah, no, you can't have a child at home. And I was like, wouldn't it be great if I had this baby at home and she's just going to hang out with me? And that was just what I was visualizing, not knowing that it was actually going to happen,
Hmm.
Tony.
What
And
a surprise, Michelle. You manifested that
I
essentially.
literally
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Yes, that's essentially probably what it was. Because when I did wake up in the middle of the night, it was a week before her expected birthing time.
Mhm.
And I woke up and I knew that there were sensations going on in my body. I knew something was going on. But again, I think the whole feeling of pain and intensity and all of these other things that I felt in that first and that second birth, they just disappeared. And I walked into the bathroom and I said to my husband, I think the baby's coming. And within a 2-second window, I walked out and my water broke right there in the bedroom, right there on the
Wow.
floor. And my husband was like panicking and like trying to go get everything ready. And I'm like, honey, I literally took my hand and I was like, I feel her head. She's there.
Oh, wow.
And I went over to the bed and I said, just go call my mom, who was there at the time. And she came in and I said, Mom, I'm going to tell you when to expect her because I could literally feel it.
So
And I,
you had no doula or nobody
no,
was there? Oh
nobody was
my,
there.
holy smokes. All right.
I took one breath, the head came out, second breath, the baby came out. And that was it.
Wow.
Right there on my bed in the middle of the night. And it was just the most magical experience. And that was, again, one of those intuitive things like this is so amazing. What did I do? I had my baby and I was back to work in 8 weeks.
Of course you were. Of course. So that begs the question, you learned so much through your kids and through childbirth and through the grounding and through the yoga, the mindfulness, all of those incredibly effective techniques that are used to ground somebody and to get them on track and to gain levels of clarity and awareness to move forward.
Mhm.
You're back at work. When did you go about finally saying, "You know what? I have to give back. I found something. It's almost like I found the gold mine. I need to share this wealth of information. I need to share these things to other people who've gone through this." Your smart parenting process or method.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
did that get developed? And can you go a little bit into what that is?
When I went back to work in that 8 week period with my third, I really had this goal of, okay, I am not going to let this affect how I move forward in my career. And granted, I probably took that to a little bit more of an extreme than I originally anticipated, but I really set out for all of the things that did not work in that first and second postpartum phase. The feelings that I had mentally, physically, I did not want that in this third birth. So I really had a very clear goal in mind. One of them was breastfeeding because I pretty much failed in with the first. With the second, I did a little bit better. I made sure we had the lactation counselor ready, and but then 3 months later, we picked up and moved cross country. So I had to like
Mm,
restart. That was a whole physical shift as well. And so with the third, I was in this job that was I was traveling all around the world. So I had to figure it out. And I said, I'm going to breastfeed. So this is me reading customs laws and TSA type regulations on how I could take this milk with me everywhere. And I ended up breastfeeding her for 3 years
mm,
into this role of traveling, moving around, having all these meetings. People would see me on Zoom calls. Sometimes the baby would be home with me, and I would just be like with her right there at my chest because it was a priority for me. And at the same time, you cannot stop being the leader, the manager, the mother. And so there were a lot of experiences that really made me rethink that. And then COVID came along.
mm.
So COVID really put a dent into everybody's lives. And here we are all at home. At the time, it's my husband, myself, and the three kids. So five of us are trying to figure out how do we do school, work, meetings. My husband would literally get up and go into one room, and my high schooler at the time would go into another room. And
Mhm.
here I am trying to figure out the two younger ones, getting them situated while the expectations were just unbelievable, right? We were supposed to
Mhm.
just continue our lives like it was another regular day. And that was crazy.
Yeah.
And all along that path, my kids were also practicing some of what I was practicing, not because I forced them. They just went into things on their own. And you also get to a point as a parent where you may not be picking up the signals of certain things. One of those signals was that my high schooler at the time was struggling. She was struggling mentally, and we didn't see it, we didn't know it. It's something I absolutely deeply regret. And when she went to see her therapist, she walked out of that first meeting and she said, Mom, this therapist recommended yoga. You already doing this. You help everyone else with it. Because at the time I was just dabbling in and out. I would do things with people. I would go to my practice. I would help
Mhm.
people, somebody who's pregnant, be like, oh, you should definitely do this or whatever. And she said, you always said that you wanted to do this one day. What if you opened a yoga studio? And that's when it happened. Like I didn't even think
Mm.
twice, Tony. At that point, I was already going through my own struggles at work and trying to balance. I had my own health issues that had started popping up the older you get. And
Oh, yeah.
I said, okay, let's see what this looks like. And so the Smart Journey to Parenting was formed from all of those experiences, plus what I learned as a leader as I was working all the way up to, I literally left at the height of my career. So I thought, what if we approach this in the same way as we do our careers? What if as you're planning to make a family long before you even are pregnant, why don't you think about it so that when that time comes, you're already getting there. And so in my SMART journey to parenting, the S stands for setting your vision, right? What do you want from this as a parent in this pregnancy? If you're not pregnant, you could even, this journey is really across any life transition, right? What is your intention at the end of the day? When we go to a yoga class, they start the class and you're going there and they say, okay, think about the intention for your practice. And so that's where it really comes from. The M stands for mindfully prepare. How are you going to accomplish this goal, but in an intentional way? The A is advancing understanding. So in a pregnant world, it's advancing your understanding of the factors that are involved physiologically, mentally, physically, everything in you having this baby and what's going to happen after. Because we don't think of the after. Sometimes we're so focused on just getting to the point of having the baby, and then everything else starts piling on.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, if I think about me not being pregnant, that advancing understanding is for me personally, or anyone from a health perspective. What are the factors that you need to understand that will really make sure that your well-being is taken care of? And then R is rise with strength. That's the physical. So for me, that's my physical yoga practice. For someone else, it might be walking. For someone else, it might be cardio. Whatever that is, how are we moving our bodies now with intention? And the last one, T, is thriving together. In the with my perinatal couples, it's really focused on the postpartum. How do we get that connection? How do we work together? What do you need to make sure that you are now transitioning in a way that will be able to help you get back to your job? And so that's what that SMART is.
Thanks, Michelle. I really appreciate it. And again, we could talk like forever about it, but
I
but and I
thoroughly
really
enjoyed this conversation.
and I really appreciate your insight. That was fantastic. And so, can you throw out where anybody can get a hold of you and what you have to offer?
Yes, we have our maternal and wellness sanctuary, our physical studio space in Pennsylvania, serving Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and the surrounding areas. And you can learn more about that on yogamazia.com. And I also work with families, parents, couples, leaders to support their navigation of parenting from pregnancy all the way into the postpartum stages and beyond. And if this conversation resonated with you, I would love to speak with you. You can book a call with me on smartparentingwithmichelle.com.
Awesome. I love it. And then for me, of course, it's tonydufresne.com, but you will not be able to spell that. I'll just say it right now. So you're going to go to theconfidencedoc.com. If you have any questions or concerns, or if you want to chat with me, I'll give you a half an hour for free. If you feel like there's a transition, you've got something happening or your relationship there's an issue with that, drop me an email. It's tony@theconfidencedoc.com. I hope things are good. I have 10 years worth of podcasts out there. I've got 2.5 years worth of the She Talks Confidence podcast on all of the platforms. If you want to go back and check out any of those, they're out there. So go back and enjoy yourself. Or lastly, if you have any suggestions for shows, then drop me a line. Let me know. Hope things are good. We'll talk to you later.